The Memorial Tuesday was broadcast around the world, and thousands of journalists converged on the soccer stadium. We spoke earlier to Justice Malala, a political analyst and newspaper editor, and I asked him if the ceremony rose to the standard of excellence of Nelson Mandela.
No, it did not. Nelson Mandela was a man who loved the occasion, who would have loved a bit of dancing and singing and so forth. And I don't think it got there. And there were several reasons for that. In my view, I think the organization of the whole thing was a bit shoddy. It could have done better. Secondly, it was all about the big men, the Barack Obamas, the Jacob Zumas, our president here. And so it excluded the common man and women, the men and women in the street, the people who loved Nelson Mandela and whom Nelson Mandela also loved. And so they couldn't get here because the organization of buses and trains was not as good as it could have been. Secondly, it rained, it poured with rain most of the day. And I think that did discourage people somewhat from coming. But I think the spirit of Nelson Mandela is what was missing. This is a man who would have appreciated some music, some life in it. And all it was a lot of speeches by a lot of politicians. And I think that let the side down somewhat.
Those comments notwithstanding, Justice, what were the highlights for you and for the crowd?
I think the highlight for me was that, one, here we were more than 40,000 of us celebrating Nelson Mandela. His spirit, in a sense, the leadership that he displayed was there. And I think Barack Obama was possibly the best speaker of the day because he really went into the idea of Nelson Mandela, the ideas of Nelson Mandela, what he stood for, and what all of us, can do to try to have a bit of Mandela in all of us. When he called out all those political leaders and said, many of you talk about Mandela, but you don't do what he would have wanted you to do. I thought that was beautiful. So that was a highlight for me. Another highlight was Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who turned around to people who had booed the president of South Africa, Jacob Zuma, and said, this is a day of respect. This is a day for Nelson Mandela. I want you to be quiet. I want to hear a pin drop. I thought that was leadership at its best. So, there were moments like that which reminded you of Nelson Mandela. That is what Nelson Mandela would have done. That is the speech Nelson Mandela would have given. So, there were very many moments of pride where I thought, wow, I'm happy and I'm proud to be in this stadium today, thinking about Nelson Mandela.
You just brought up current South African President Jacob Zuma was booed by the crowd. Did that surprise you, and what do you make of it?
President Zuma is very much in control of his party, the ANC here. He has not been booed publicly by his supporters. What was interesting for me was that virtually every political analyst, commentator I've spoken to didn't expect him to be booed. Secondly, the ANC itself was absolutely taken aback and shocked by what happened. I think it's a bit of a wake-up call for the ANC. President Zuma has been mired in many, many personal scandals, and I think people are saying to him, if you're going to stand in front of us and talk about Nelson Mandela, an inspirational leader, then you better up your game yourself.
Well, starting tomorrow, Mr. Mandela's body will lie in state. As I understand it, dignitaries will be allowed the opportunity to view his remains, and then the following 2 days it will be open to the public. There's been, although the day of prayer and reflection, a great bit of celebration of his life. Will his body lying in state turn the mood of the country and the people more toward mourning and sadness, do you think?
I don't think mourning and sadness. I think we had a period of shock right at the beginning with the announcement of his passing. Then we had a celebration. I think we've entered a period of reflection where people will be thinking a lot about what President Barack Obama, for example, said, about what Mandela means for us and how we in South Africa, remember we're 19 years into our democracy, we celebrate 20 years of democracy next year, and we're all thinking about what do we have and how do we take it forward. I think that's what's beginning to emerge now. And I think over the next 3, 4, 5 days, as we move towards the actual funeral, that's where South Africa will be. It will be what kind of South Africa did we dream about, did Mandela dream about, and what kind of South Africa can we build now?
In point in case, that's a very good question. Do you believe the ANC in South Africa as a whole is prepared to move forward, to take the mantle left by Nelson Mandela?
I think certainly over the next few months and over the next few weeks, we have an election looming in 2014 here, and I think the ANC will definitely say this is the party of Nelson Mandela, which it is, and it will say this is the party that you need to stick with. South Africans, though, I think after 20 years are beginning to ask some tough questions, and those questions are, what about the poverty that exists in this country? Remember, we have 52% unemployment among young people. In a population of 51 million, we have 7 million adults who are out on the streets. So people are asking some tough questions that, are you really the party of Nelson Mandela if you're not making a dent in the poverty, the inequality that continues to exist in South Africa?
Justice Malala, thank you so much for taking some time with us. We do appreciate it.